Hello and welcome to India's World. Last week, China put out a white paper entitled China's Policies on Asia-Pacific Security Cooperation. The white paper sets out China's vision for the region on how to maintain peace and stability through dialogue and cooperation. It claims that China will firmly follow the path of peaceful development and the policy of building friendship and partnership with neighboring countries to create an amicable, secure and prosperous neighborhood. The white paper has a section on India arguing that Sino-Indian ties have deepened since 2015 and presents a rosy picture of the growing relationship. To discuss the thinking behind the white paper and its claims about Sino-Indian relations, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, a distinguished diplomat. He was Foreign Secretary of India and has served as India's ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France and Russia. We have with us Professor Srikanth Konapalli sitting at that corner. He is a professor in Chinese studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University and one of India's foremost experts on China. We have with us sitting in the middle Ambassador R.S. Kalha. He retired as a secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs and was ambassador of India to Indonesia and Iraq. He's also served in Beijing. He's an expert on China and author of a book called India-China Boundary Issues, Quest for Settlement. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Sibal, let me begin with you. How common is it for the Chinese Foreign Ministry to publish a white paper on a particular region? What is the thinking behind such a white paper? Is it a statement of intent? What is it?
Well, you know, there has been a lot of demand that the so-called big powers, and China in particular, should be much more transparent about its intentions and its policies. And they've got into this mode of publishing these white papers in order to lay out what their vision is. Now, how seriously one should take this, how credible these documents are, is a matter of discussion. To my mind, and I've read through the entire document, it's a bit of a smoke screen. And China wants to project itself, especially in the context of recent developments, as a country with peaceful intentions, and all the things they're saying in the paper about a stable, peaceful, prosperous environment. But I would like to look at their actions on the ground rather than what they say on paper. Okay. Because when they write a document, they can always resort to generalized statements and display their peaceful intentions, which are contrary to their actual situation on the ground. So I don't take this seriously. It is just propagandist, basically.
Okay. Ambassador Kalha, do you think the white paper is just a propagandist paper, or do you think it actually shows certain intentions? For example, there are sections which suggest that China wants to squeeze out what they see as overly meddlesome United States from the region. And it wants to clarify its own positions on various disputes on the region.
You see, this publication which they have started is of a recent origin. They never used to do that before. Yeah. In fact, they used to rely on editorials in the People's Daily to put forward their point of view. But having said that, I would say that mostly this is for internal consumption, because the regime has to show to its own people amount of that they are peace-loving and that the fact that they are well regarded in the world. But I would also say that sometimes reality doesn't match with what they say, because if you look at the periphery of China, they are having problems with almost every country, starting from north, say from Japan, from Taiwan, from Southeast Asia, with India. In fact, Pakistan seems to be the only bright star as far as the periphery is concerned. Of course, they say that they would like to have good relations with the United States, just like what you mentioned. In fact, they have that 3-point formula which they've put across. It's a kind of a win-win situation which they envisage. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that they realize that the United States is perhaps the only country which can cause them strategic difficulties. And therefore, particularly since after Trump has been elected, they have been having serious troubles as far as their relationship with the United States is concerned. So I do think that they are also trying to sort of edge themselves as far as the world is concerned to see how much they can move and in what direction they can go.
Okay. Professor Konapalli, when the white paper hits out at other nations, and it does, saying, and I quote, some countries are increasing their military deployment in the region, unquote, and that a certain country seeks to shake off military constraints in the region. Which countries is it referring to? Is it the countries that one would normally expect? Is it the US, Japan, or is it all those countries with which it has disputes in the South China Sea, East China Sea with Japan, of course?
Basically, it is a kind of strategy that they are unveiling. The first one is obviously for the United States, which had a certain US rebalance strategy for the Asia Pacific since 2009. Second is Shinzo Abe's plans for revival of the constitutional provisions, including collective self-defense, which has been passed a couple of years ago, and also there are some speculations about increasing the defense budget and acquisition of more arms, including self-defense maritime forces outreach, more than 1,000 nautical miles, and also there is a debate about the nuclear factor. And overall, as part of the normal Japan, as the discourse in Japan.
So it's basically telling them that our positions in this region, our sovereign claims in this region are non-negotiable.
Indeed, but many of these have been dormant before, and suddenly they have popped up as well. For instance, the 9-dash line in the South China Sea, which was discredited by the July 12th PCA ruling, Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling. Some of these have been dormant in the 1950s and now suddenly have come up. For example, southern Tibet concept for Arunachal Pradesh came up in 2003 to 2005. It wasn't there in 1950s. It wasn't there in
Although
the 60s.
there's no reference to that in this paper.
That's right. That's right. But overall discourse has been that many of these sovereignty and territorial integrity issues have been dormant before, and suddenly as China is rising, it is also expanding its horizon.
Before we end this section, Ambassador Sibal, on the very day the white paper was issued, in the US, the Trump's Secretary of State designate, Rex Tillerson, was telling Washington, and I quote, "We are going to have to send China a clear signal that first, the island building must stop, and second, your access to those islands also is not going to be allowed," unquote. So do you think that we are headed towards greater volatility in the region? Here's America saying that we won't allow you to do what you're doing in the South China Sea.
Well,
and there is China actually saying that this is non-negotiable.
It's high time that the United States took a tough position. The previous administration has been very soft and has allowed China to establish claims on the ground and reinforce those claims by militarizing, creating artificial islands and militarizing them, and in fact creating a situation where they can hope to exert control over shipping and overflights in this larger region. Now, whether Trump can do what Rex Tillerson is saying in terms of preventing China from militarizing islands and, more importantly, denying access is a moot question, because denying access means the use of military force, and that can then lead to potential conflict. And whether there is stomach in the United States as well as in China to enter into a military conflict is open to question, but the signals are clear. And at the very least, it will prevent China from militarizing any further and placing arms and other things further in these islands. But denial of access, I think that is going to be that's going to be a moot question.
All right. Okay, we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us, because in the next section we'll focus on India. Welcome back. We're discussing the latest Chinese white paper on Beijing's policies towards Asia Pacific and what it says about India. So talking of India, Ambassador Kalha, China has presented a fairly upbeat picture of its relationship with India. It is said that Sino-Indian partnership has deepened since 2015. What is the factual basis for saying this?
I don't think they are entirely correct, because we have serious problems with the Chinese, and these problems relate not only to what we should do about Pakistan, but also, of course, there is the perennial boundary question, which is still not resolved. And third are the strategic issues, and particularly as they pertain to Southeast Asia. We have differences with them on Southeast Asia. But I would just like to point out that perhaps even when we talk about India's entry into NSG, or we talk about Masood Azhar, and the fact that the Chinese are blocking the UN Security Council from taking action on Masood Azhar, the common factor there is Pakistan.
Yeah.
And therefore, it is the question of how to deal with Pakistan. Our view about Pakistan and their view about Pakistan is diametrically opposite.
Yeah.
They think that the Pakistan army is actually a force which is devoted to tackling terrorism. In fact, they say that Pakistan army should be strengthened to tackle terrorism in the Afpak region.
Okay.
Our view is completely different.
Yeah.
Take, for example, the Pakistani, terrorists crossing over into India in Uri and in Pathankot, etc. The Chinese never criticized Pakistan for it.
Well, now they blocked their border with Pakistan in Xinjiang because
so they
were crossing over Xinjiang too.
I have serious doubts
Yeah.
about it, because after all, there it's a lot of toing and froing going across the border. But that doesn't mean that their relationship with Pakistan is...
No, I take that point. So you're saying that there's no factual basis really for saying.
Absolutely not. Absolutely
Now, Professor Konapalli, isn't it curious that this white paper, which celebrates Sino-Indian ties in a way, came barely 15 days after China described the launch of Agni 5 missile by India as illegal, citing a UN resolution. So on the one hand, here you are sort of accusing India of so-called illegality, and on the other hand, you're saying our relationship is sort of all roses.
I think it's still perfect. You can have two-track kind of policies. The Chinese have the concept of Liangzhou, which is a soft hand and a hard hand policy. So the soft hand is that there is the deepening, which includes the strategic communications, high-level meetings between the leadership at the prime minister level, at the president level, at the vice president level, at the foreign minister level, at the defense ministerial level, at various levels, strategic communication. Secondly, you have trade. China still is the largest trading partner for India with $71 billion in 2016, although trade deficit has also gone up. Secondly, the investment profile, although not very rosy, yet that is one area. Some 500 Chinese companies are working in India. Thirdly, you have also the people-to-people contact. Nearly 7 lakh people have visited each other last year. On the other hand, you have also the hard hand, as we call. You mentioned about the the Agni 5 testing. There is also, of course, the Chinese, as Ambassador Kalha mentioned, about the Masood Azhar case, the NSG, Nuclear Supplies Group issue. More important, also, the Chinese ambassador in New Delhi had proposed a few days ago the Friendship Treaty and Cooperation. Secondly, in terms of merging One Belt, One Road with that of the Act East Asia policy. Thirdly, he had also mentioned about the FTA, free trade area between China and India, and so many other initiatives. So I think this soft and hard are still continuing on same track.
So, Sibal, he calls it soft hand, hard hand. But in common language, would you call it two-faced policy?
Absolutely.
And would you, when they say, for example, that India and China's collaboration in the area of defense has sort of grown, and they say that the relations between the Chinese and Indian militaries remain healthy and stable in general, with increasingly close communication exchange and pragmatic cooperation in greater breadth and depth. If such is the level of our collaboration, then why on earth do we have China showing a hard hand on our border all the time, and especially at times where a soft hand is being shown by a high dignitary from China visiting India?
Look, if we were to issue a white paper about our relations with China in the context of Asia Pacific, we will also, as part of an exercise, essentially a bureaucratic exercise, list out the things the Chinese are saying, that we maintain high-level contacts of the various kinds, as Professor has mentioned, and that we have had joint military exercises, that no incident has occurred on the border, the management of the border is peaceful. Our military guys are themselves saying that at the moment the border is peaceful. We list out all that. But that doesn't reflect the actual reality, strategic reality of the relationship. And I don't think we should get into this business about accepting Chinese concept of dealing with other countries, soft hand or hard hand. The reality is that beyond Masood Azhar and everything else, and beyond the Pakistan factor, China is making it very clear that they don't consider India as an equal. They don't consider India as any realistic rival, even in the region, leave aside Asia. And they are determined to limit India's rise and its emergence on the international scene in a higher status as a real regional power. And that is the whole business about opposition to us in the NSG and everything else, because it doesn't affect China's core interests at all. If you really look at it objectively, it does not at all. It is a much larger message which goes beyond Pakistan, that we are the principal country in Asia. We have primacy in Asia. Asia is for the Asians. We're going to dominate Asia. And India is part of the periphery, and we'll manage India.
But
these signals that they are giving actually shows a degree of contempt for India's real concerns, because they are totally avoiding them.
But they're showing similar contempt for Japanese interests,
Yes.
Vietnamese interests, Philippine interests.
yes.
So India is not very special in that.
No, because India is the only country with the potential of challenging China. Japan and others can't do it on their own.
Okay.
They need to be in alliance with America and anybody else. We can do it on our own, and the only country that can do it. And that's why potentially India can measure up to China as a power in Asia. And that's why, but it's very funny it's very strange that the way they try and denigrate India and show contempt for India, and try to put India in its place, saying that, you manage your relations with Pakistan, everything that you do, we see in the optic of your relationship with Pakistan. That's a cover. Basically, they're trying to bog us down in South Asia.
But they're not denigrating India in this white paper.
No, because it's a propaganda sheet.
right. Okay.
Because they want to look good.
Okay. We need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the Chinese white paper on security cooperation Asia Pacific and what it says about its relationship with India. Professor Konapalli, you wanted to say something?
I think through this white paper, China is conveying that it wants to change its policy towards India. 15 times India was mentioned,
Absolutely.
very unprecedented in all the white papers so far that China released. Since 1995, China has been releasing white papers. So this is one unprecedented. Secondly, India was placed after the United States, Russia, and then India, and then Japan, and then ASEAN countries. So there is the first time India bounces back to the third position in the Chinese calculus. Of course, we have to do a hard-nosed analysis of whether this is conducive for our own national interests, but signaling from China is clear.
Okay.
Of course, we have to, in our diplomacy, we have to say these are the bottom lines, these are the red lines, these are the amber lines, these are the green lines in India-China relations. We have to be more like Donald Trump is asking reciprocity from China. We need to also ask for one China policy, what is the reciprocal arrangement that we have for India, for one India policy or such items.
Okay. Mr. Kalha, do you think that positive spin on India in this white paper is also in keeping with the positive commentaries you've been seeing in Chinese media about saying that India will continue with its independent foreign policy, as a counter to those who think that India is sitting in the lap of the US as part of US plans for this region of rebalancing and countering China?
You see, if you see the Chinese press, they've always made the point that India, together with the United States, does present for them a very strategic challenge, particularly not only in the Indian Ocean area, but also in Southeast Asia. Don't forget that China imports something like 300 million tons of energy and fossil fuel. That is the total requirement on an annual basis. Now, even with the best of all the pipelines that they're building from Central Asia, or whether they're building it from, say, through Myanmar, etc., the bulk of their supplies will have to come from the Middle East. Almost 26% will have to come from the Middle East.
Through the Indian Ocean.
Which means that they'll have to cross the Indian Ocean. And therefore, the role of the Indian Navy becomes a very important factor as far as their calculations are concerned. So there is the realization within China that while you can ignore India, but the fact of the matter is that India is a factor as far as their policies are concerned. But let me also mention to you, you see, as far as China's economic development is concerned, they need the Indian market.
Absolutely.
And I'll give you one very small example.
Yeah.
Look at Xiaomi, for example. It's one of the leading brands in China. Now, Xiaomi cannot compete in the world because the two brands, that is Samsung and Apple, dominate. But Xiaomi in India can, because here the volumes are large enough.
Yeah.
And you've seen in the last year how much, they have been able to expand exponentially. From the starting with one unit, they are going up into several units for manufacture.
Okay.
So they realize this. And in the Chinese decision-making process, now their SOCs, which is the state-owned enterprises, which are now more or less world-class, they are beginning to have a say as far as their policy making is concerned, because it affects their economic well-being.
Yeah, let me ask you something slightly different, because this point has been well made. China is believed to be upset with India selling arms, especially the Akash surface-to-air missile, to Vietnam. And a pretty harsh commentary has come in global times, which they use often to sort of test the waters. Now, what objection can China have to India selling surface-to-air missiles to Vietnam when they supply all the arms to Pakistan, and Pakistan's nuclear program and missile program is entirely based on Chinese technology?
Worse, because after our Agni 4 and 5 tests, China has said that they will help Pakistan increase the range of their missiles.
Yeah.
So this is all double talk and double standards. In any case, if Vietnam wants to acquire this sort of capability, they can acquire it from Russia and the United States. They're willing to sell them arms. So it's not as if India is the only source. And I don't even know if we can supply Akash in any big numbers, because it is a missile we have just developed and we have our own needs.
Yeah.
So this is, China is engaged in a psychological warfare against us and to keep us unbalanced. And the soft noises they are making is also intended to make it difficult for those people in the establishment who wants a harder China policy, because there'll be constant pressure through these lobbies on the government of India to look at the larger picture.
But could it also be that they're making all these positive noises because if they talked about all the negativities in the relationship, it would impinge on all the multilateral dialogues that we are engaged with?
Absolutely.
BRICS, G20,
Absolutely.
RIC.
Absolutely. They're keeping their options open. And they also know that India has not said the last word with regard to its relationship with China, and also its relationship with the United States in the context of China in Southeast Asia and elsewhere, because they believe that India has a tradition of non-alignment, independence of foreign policy. So they like to encourage it, and they like to trigger those sentiments in India which favor an independent foreign policy by making soft noises. But there is confusion in China's thinking and minds, because on the other hand, they take action and they do things on the ground which actually have deepened a great deal of mistrust between India and China, which to my mind was not necessary, because it doesn't hurt China's core interests.
So, is there confusion even in India? Because we criticize China, we say we have all these differences, and suddenly you see emergence of voices from the strategic community praising One Belt, One Road initiative, suggesting that CPEC may not be such a good idea, India should join it, because after all it's only a follow-up of OBOR.
Well, there is obviously in any establishment, you have these differences of opinion. Within China, within the US, within every other country, you have this between the foreign ministry, between the defense ministry, between the home, whatever. So there is all establishments have now become much more complex. And so this is quite obvious.
Okay.
But what is important is, I think, what is the baseline? CPEC passes through the sovereign territory of India. Period. So any government, as Xi Jinping told the KMT chairwoman, that we are not willing to sacrifice our sovereignty interests. Will the Indian establishment also make a similar statement saying that the Parliament resolution of 1993 mentions about Kashmir, so we will not participate in CPEC projects. This is sovereignty issue.
One doesn't know, but we're running out of time. What I want to ask you is this, that if CPEC was a cooperative venture, why wasn't India taken into confidence? which suggests that it was a strategic move by China. Because if it were a cooperative thing, they would have invited India before announcing CPEC and said, you know, why don't you become a part of it? We know this is disputed territory, but what do you have to say about it?
You see, even if you look at some of their, what they call recent articles, they talk of CPEC not only in economic terms, they talk in terms that it is a factor for stabilization of Pakistan.
Yeah.
That we are going to provide stability, because not only will the economy of Pakistan get stabilized, but at the same time, because of the very nature of the CPEC, what they call strategic environment around Pakistan would also get stabilized. And don't forget that the Chinese are assiduously wooing the Iranians also to join in with CPEC, because the Iranian, what they call Chabahar port, is not very far away from Gwadar.
Okay, we're running out of time. So quickly, I want to ask you one last question, a quick answer, because time is up. Do you think our China policy is confused? Do we get taken in by these white papers and what China say? And do we try and justify it by saying, look, Chinese policy is Janus-faced, as is any country's foreign policy?
I think to some extent there has been confusion in our dealings with China, but a lot of it derives from the fact that we really don't know how to handle this very powerful entity, which has become even more powerful, which has territorial designs on us, which is arming our neighbors, which is penetrating our neighborhood, which is coming into the Indian Ocean, which actually sees itself as a rival of the United States. It's a formidable challenge we have. So what we see as confusion is also a degree of helplessness in dealing with a neighbor like China.
Okay, on that sad note, we've run out of time. I would like to thank all of you, Professor Srikanth Konapalli, Ambassador R.S. Kalha, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. Thank you for joining in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.